Hello and welcome back to Moving Mountains. It's day 10 and we're sitting here on a wide open beach in northern New South Wales, Australia. It's one of my favorite places to come early in the morning when I'm setting intention for my day because of its expansiveness. The ocean and the sea air and this broad beach and the dunes, they all seem to just open the senses and expand one's view of what is possible. And as we step into week 2 with big strides into the arena of our mind, this feels like a beautiful combination of elements to help cultivate our lessons. And this morning I had a really interesting encounter traveling through the path we just came and the amazing sunbeams that were a result of the amazing rainstorm that we had last night. I came down to the beach and I went for a walk, and I was walking along the beach and just dreaming about the lesson for today and considering the week that we've now entered and this powerful journey that we're continuing. And then I just felt to stop. And so I stopped where I felt to stop and I started to do my Qigong. And I did Qigong for several minutes, and then when I finished, I opened my eyes and I looked, and there, right before me, about 20 meters in front of me, which I hadn't seen before, was a gigantic jellyfish that had been washed up from the ocean. And I don't know whether it had been washed up during the storm last night or this morning as the tide came in, but there was this humongous jellyfish, like this big of a jellyfish, laying on the sand. And I finished my Qigong and was going to leave, but then I kept sort of feeling like, no, I gotta see if I can help this jellyfish, because he doesn't belong on the sand, jellyfish don't walk. And so I walked over to it, and I could see that it was quite damaged, and I don't really actually even know how to tell if a jellyfish is alive, but he was still very jellyish, and he was just sitting there right on the edge of the shore break, so unable to get back into the ocean. And he didn't appear to be the type of jellyfish that had big stingers, but I didn't know. So I started to consider, how can I move this jellyfish that's massive back out into the ocean, back out to its source where he belongs, whether it's alive or whether it's not alive. I know that jellyfish are actually highly intelligent forms of life, and there's some incredible research that's been done recently on their intelligence and the evolution of their cellular structure. And so I thought, well, one way or another, it would be really nice to help this living or once living being return to its source. And so I even though the morning activities and everything that I needed to do was calling me, I felt drawn to help this jellyfish. So I started to try to figure out how to pick him up and carry him out into the ocean, and a wave came in and kind of washed, and I could almost push him along, but that didn't really work. And as I was sitting there looking at him, I looked at him and I realized, my gosh, this jellyfish looks exactly like a brain. Like their structure, when you look at it, it's like this interweaving of all these fibers and tubes and stuff, and it looked like I was looking at like a giant sea turtle sized brain on the sand. And it occurred to me that there's probably some parallels in there for the journey that we're on right now as we enter the power and the role of our mind in our life. And so I finally figured out that what I could do was I actually dug my fingers down into the sand beneath the jellyfish, and I got so that I wasn't because I found that if I started to pull him, they're very fragile, and the fibers of his body started to sort of break away. And so instead of grabbing him, I dug deep beneath him, or just below him, and got a sort of 2 big broad handfuls of sand, and I put them underneath the jellyfish, and then I lifted him, and he was really heavy, really hard to lift, but I lifted him just ever so gently with this layer of sand underneath him, and just started to walk with him out into the ocean. And I realized that I had to bring him out past the waves, because otherwise he would just get washed back in with the next wave back up onto the beach. And so I just gently and just kind of eased my way through the waves with this big guy, and he's sort of sort of hanging over my arms and dripping over the side, and it was kind of a strange sight, I'm sure. But I just kept walking and finally got so we were deep enough. I was almost chest height, and I felt like I could just let him go and he would drift into the current that was going out to the sea. And then I came back in and kind of finished up my Qigong and felt like, for whatever reason, my moment was complete. And as I was walking back home, I suddenly started thinking about this jellyfish, and it occurred to me that the way we move this jellyfish back out into the ocean is really how we want to treat our mind this week. That we need to find a way to gently get underneath the surface of our mind and not tear it apart or leave it stranded on the beach or kind of dissect it as it would be soon dissected if it was left on the beach for the birds to see, but to just gently dig in underneath the conscious layers of our mind to our subconscious arena and gently lift and pick up our mind and carry it out past the waves and the currents of our normal day-to-day thought and out into the wider, broader ocean of consciousness, out into the wider, broader ocean of all possibility, all out into the wider possibilities and expansive nature of the true source of our thoughts and thinking, so that we can begin to, more than anything, reconnect our little mind with the great mind of the ocean out there, that we can return to source, so to speak. Because if we can do that in our mind, if we can remember in our mind a higher way, a broader way, a more expansive and divinely aligned way to think, then everything we dream and everything we vision and everything we cultivate in our life through our thoughts will be higher and more expansive and deeply connected for it. So before we dive in deeper to the mind, so to speak, I want to take this opportunity this morning to do a little exercise that might help us reconnect our mind with a greater sense of ourself, and might allow us to gently carry our mind out past the thoughts and perceptions of who we are to a greater source of who we really are. So join me for an interactive meditative audio session this morning as we open our perspective to the ocean of our true identity and connect in our mind and our body and spirit with the essence of who we really are.